Welcome, weary traveller, to a tale whispered by the sands of time, designed to guide you into a restful slumber. There was a moment, just before the second crown touched her brow, when she forgot who she was. It wasn't fear, for that had long been exiled from her body, burned away in the fires of betrayal, strangled in the chambers where her children screamed. It wasn't power either. She had worn that too many times, and found it thin, like a veil over bone. No, this was something stranger. In that breath, before the crown settled, she felt a profound silence, and within that silence something ancient moved. It was not the gods, nor her dead, but the void where those things used to be. A hunger for meaning so old it had become indistinguishable from the woman who carried it. Then the cold gold touched her skin. The priests called her divine, the people called her mother, and her enemies called her monster. Yet history would call her immortal. But before she became a religion, she had been a daughter, and her name was never truly hers, but a mosaic of titles, aspirations, and dynastic obligations pressed into her like coins struck against her spine. The first time she was traded, she was merely 15. Her father, a warlord who artfully pretended to be a philosopher king, sent her east, not for outright war, nor for lasting peace, but for the complex strategic idea of both. Her husband-to-be was a man of 63, a figure carved from the crumbling bones of a dying empire. He had already buried 2 wives and outlived 3 sons. His precarious throne perpetually ringed with wolves, barbarians without, traitors within. He desperately needed something holy, something pure, something that bled the right, noble blood. So, without hesitation, they gave him her. The ceremony itself was dazzling, a grand spectacle of polished marble, fragrant incense, and the stern visages of gods etched on every wall. She wore a dress of shimmering gold-threaded linen, and a crown specifically forged to mimic the radiant sun. Yet beneath the splendor, her hands trembled. This was not from fear, but from a vivid memory. Her mother, years ago, had told her, "You'll learn the weight of gold. It's always heavier than it looks." She learned that profound truth on her wedding night, and she learned even more 3 months later when she found herself utterly alone in a vast palace where the very walls whispered in languages she did not speak, holding a new child in her belly, and wondering which part of her life, if any, had ever truly been her own. By the age of 20, she had given birth to 3 sons and had shed all illusions about her life. A year later, at 21, she had cultivated a formidable reputation, not merely for her beauty, for beauty she knew was cheap and fleeting, but for her profound silence. She never indulged in gossip, never pleaded for favors, and never begged for mercy. Instead, she listened, a quiet observer, absorbing every word, every nuance, every unspoken truth. And what she heard was chillingly clear. The court was rotten to its core, Her aging husband was slowly dying, and her 3 shining boys were either destined heirs or dangerous obstacles, depending on which breath you asked the scheming nobles in. So, with a chilling resolve, she chose a path no queen had ever dared to tread, to strike first. She herself did not kill, for such an act was beneath her refined sensibilities. Yet she allowed the killing, orchestrating events from the shadows. The king's firstborn, her stepson, was swiftly found guilty of treason, the evidence meticulously manufactured, the trial a mere performance, and the sentence brutally swift. She did not weep at his funeral, her face a mask of stoic grief. But that very night, alone in her chambers, she took off her heavy crown and looked into her own reflection in the mirror, and for the very first time she saw something profoundly unfamiliar in her own face, pure, calculated strategy. Victory, she quickly learned, was rarely clean. The nobles never truly forgave her, their whispers painting her as a witch who dabbled in dark arts. Her husband, half senile and increasingly frail, leaned on her more each day, until his final breath released him from his earthly burdens. And when he died, the fragile peace of the kingdom shattered, and everything turned to fire. A rival king, seizing the opportunity, invaded their lands. The once mighty army collapsed into disarray, and her fair-weather allies vanished like smoke. And she, queen, widow, and mother of heirs, was suddenly reduced to mere prey. They came for her sons first, their cruelties swift and merciless. One was stabbed in his sleep, his innocent life extinguished in the dark, while the other was brutally dragged through the streets in chains, a public spectacle of their downfall. Only the eldest escaped, sent away days before on a mother's raw instinct rather than any grand prophecy, a desperate act of foresight born from love. Then she fled, not in a gilded chariot befitting a queen, but on foot, disguised as a humble handmaid, a queen stripped of her name and her station. History almost lost her there, a mere footnote in the annals of a fallen empire. But the gods, if they were watching, held their breath, because the woman crawling through dusty alleyways, hiding in simple donkey carts, and sleeping beside meager kitchen fires, was far from finished. Indeed, she was becoming. Why did she gamble? Because mere survival was no longer enough. Not now, not after she had endured war, exile, childbirth, and assassination attempts. What meaning would her life hold if she died as a forgotten footnote in history? She no longer simply wanted to live. She wanted profoundly to matter. So she married him, and the moment her children's innocent blood painted the floors of their shared palace, she knew with chilling clarity exactly what she had married into, and exactly what she would utterly destroy. Escape once more became her only option, this time navigated through cunning use of poison, the strategic cloak of shadow, and the calculated deployment of bribes. She journeyed through hidden caves and ancient priesthoods, securing loyalty bought in tears and glistening gold. This time, however, she fled not to nowhere, but to the very beginning, to Alexandria, to Egypt, to the vibrant city of her birth, the hallowed library of her childhood, and the serene temple where her mother once lit sacred candles. Her brother ruled there, a quiet man,
a scholar, seemingly safe from the brutal machinations of power. He welcomed her cautiously, perhaps wary of the storms she carried within her. She offered him nothing but her profound presence, yet her presence, she instinctively knew, was more than enough. For in her absence she had already begun to transcend reality, transforming into a myth. The queen who had fled death twice, the grief-stricken mother who had buried 2 sons, the formidable woman who had married death itself, and somehow walked away.
He asked her to stay, perhaps sensing the unique strength she possessed. But she, with a strategic glint in her eyes, offered him not merely a place, but a throne. Not one built of cold stone, but meticulously crafted from narrative itself. "Let us become the gods," she declared, her voice imbued with a quiet authority that brooked no argument. And to her surprise, or perhaps to her calculated expectation, he agreed. That was the 3rd marriage, and this time there was no betrayal, only pure, unyielding calculation.
They stood before the temple, a grand tableau of power and nascent divinity. He the pharaoh, and she the goddess returned. The priests chanted the ancient names of Isis and Osiris, their voices echoing through the hallowed halls, transforming what was once an abomination into a sacred sanctification. They crowned her with the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, a symbol of absolute authority, and called her Philadelphia, the sister lover, the divine consort, the very mother of order. And for the very first time, she truly believed it. Not in the gods themselves, nor in the sanctity of her marriage, but in the potent, undeniable power that was now irrevocably hers.
She ruled, not hidden behind veils or operating through the will of men, but directly with an iron will. She sat in the highest council, led armies into battle, and negotiated intricate treaties with kings who dared not look her directly in the eye. She rewrote ancient ceremonies to suit her vision, built magnificent temples that glorified her name, and funded poets who compared her to the most brilliant stars, alongside astronomers who meticulously tracked her face in the constellations themselves.
Coins were struck in her image, bearing her likeness not as a mere queen, but as a living divinity. When people came to the temples, they prayed directly to her name, bypassing the old gods. They sought her for fertility, for justice, and for vengeance against their enemies. And sometimes, in the deepest, most desperate shadows, they came asking simply how to survive in a world that seemed determined to break them.
She never had more children. She never needed to. The dynasty she meticulously built was not of mere blood, but of enduring architecture, profound ritual, and power formalized through carefully crafted memory. Every queen who came after her married her brother. Every one wore a crown echoing hers. Every coin bore her unmistakable echo. She had, in essence, become the system itself, the very myth, the unyielding law. And in doing so, with chilling precision, she had utterly erased herself. In her final days, she wandered the temple gardens in profound silence, a solitary figure amidst ancient beauty.
Her priests, always vigilant, asked if she feared death. She simply replied, her voice calm, "I've died many times. This one is easy." And when she finally passed, the city fell into a deep mourning, its people weeping in the streets. The temples sang mournful hymns for 7 continuous days. Her tomb was not marked with her name, for that was a secret, but with a potent symbol, the crown she had forged from her immense pain, and above it a stark inscription read, "She taught the gods how to survive." But if you could ask her, if you could truly ask her, beyond the cold marble, beyond the fragrant incense and the echoing chants, she might, in a quiet, knowing voice, say, "They made me a goddess because they couldn't stand the memory of what they did to the woman I used to be." And perhaps, in all the grand narratives and whispered legends, that is the truest thing of all.
She was not born cruel. The myth, of course, would vehemently say otherwise, as myths always do. They desperately need to make sense of the horror, to believe that the woman who orchestrated entire dynasties, who walked across burning empires, and somehow lived, was never soft, never vulnerable. But she was once. She had a doll once, with sapphire beads for eyes, a treasured companion. She buried the day before her first marriage, whispering into the rich, dark soil, "You don't belong where I'm going." And she was undeniably right.
They called her a goddess, but what she truly worshipped was not peace nor mercy, but an unyielding absolute order. It was the chilling knowledge that if she moved just one piece on the vast board of empire, one strategic alliance, one calculated assassination, one carefully worded decree, the entire empire might tilt, teetering on the precipice. And when it did, it would either crown her again in triumph or bury her deeper in the earth. But one thing was certain. It would notice her. That, above all else, was her real devotion, to being utterly impossible to ignore.
In the years following the sacred marriage, the kingdom under her rule truly flourished. Trade routes expanded, connecting with distant Arabia and mighty Rome, bringing unprecedented wealth. Grain flowed abundantly, feeding not just her own people, but entire nations beyond her borders. Scholars gathered under the soft moonlight in the great library of Alexandria, debating profound ideas and pushing the boundaries of knowledge. Temples, built with her face etched beside gods older than time, rose majestically towards the heavens. But beneath this veneer of prosperity, she acutely felt the immense cost. Power, she understood, bred its own relentless gravity, and that gravity perpetually pulled, demanding more. Every favor she granted inadvertently became a noose around her own neck. Every trusted ally transformed into a potential liability. Every whispered rumor of rebellion had to be answered swiftly and decisively, either with the glint of gold or the stain of blood. She didn't flinch. She had flinched once, and it had cost her 2 beloved sons. Never again would she allow herself that weakness. She began to appear not just in stories or elaborate ceremonies, but in the deepest recesses of people's dreams. Peasants toiling in the fertile Nile delta claimed the queen came to them in the shape of a regal hawk, silently guiding their plows through the rich earth.
Soldiers stationed at the distant border whispered that her disembodied voice warned them of ambushes saving their lives. And mothers, rocking their children in the quiet of the night, swore they saw her gentle presence holding their little ones, bringing comfort.
The priests, sensing the immense, burgeoning power, leaned into this phenomenon. They gave her a cult, not after her death, but during her very life, a living goddess, complete with elaborate rites, reverent hymns, fragrant incense, and even, chilling thee, blood sacrifices performed in her name. And for the very first time she was truly afraid. Not of the people who worshipped her, but of the terrifying, all-consuming entity she had become.
She tried desperately to remember her sons, to cling to their faces and laughter. But memory, she discovered, is a brittle thing. You wrap it too tightly in grief and it snaps. You unwrap it too often and it simply fades away. She could recall their cries, the fleeting warmth of their small hands, the innocent light in their eyes, and then nothing. She once asked her most trusted scribe to find a poem, anything that could describe the unimaginable sorrow of a mother who had outlived her own children. He returned the next morning, his eyes red-rimmed and weary. "There are none," he said quietly. She simply nodded. Then, with a heavy heart, she created one herself, a silent testament to her enduring pain.
Power, she knew, isolates, even when ostensibly shared. Her brother, the pharaoh, who was also her husband, was slowly slipping, not into madness, but into a deep, pervasive caution. He spoke endlessly of external threats, precarious alliances, and rigid timetables, while she spoke only of grand vision, of destiny itself. "You inherited a throne," she told him, her voice sharp with truth. "I built an empire inside it." He flinched, not from anger, but from the raw, undeniable truth of her words, a truth that exposed the chasm between them.
Their partnership, once a calculated alliance, became increasingly strained. In public, they maintained the facade of divine unity. But in private, the silences between them deepened, thick with unspoken resentments and growing distrust. He began to seek other counsel, his advisers whispering in his ear, while she, ever pragmatic, began to draft elaborate contingency plans. Because even gods can fall, and she would not be caught unprepared again.
One night a young boy came to her chambers, perhaps 11 or 12 years old. He claimed to be the son of her murdered son, which seemed utterly impossible, for her own son had died at 15, alone and without issue. Yet the boy bore the same distinctive scar above his brow, a mark she knew intimately. He knew the lullaby she had once sung only to her own child, and he smelled faintly of dust and cinnamon, just like the boy she had once nursed at her breast. She listened to his incredible story, her heart a tumult of emotions. Then, with a quiet resolve, she called for the high priest and said simply, "Protect him, but do not tell me if he is real." They obeyed her command without question,
and she never saw the boy again. Yet in the secluded garden behind her private chamber, she ordered a small marble lion built, for no stated reason, with no inscription to explain its presence. Only she, in the quiet depths of her soul, knew what it truly meant.
In the 11th year of her divine rule, the stars themselves seemed to go dark. Not literally, but something profound shifted in the cosmic order. Storms came unusually early, the mighty Nile ran perilously low, and the oracle of Amun solemnly declared that the very gods were displeased. The people whispered in hushed tones. The queen had flown too high, her ambition had grown too vast. She had become more than divine, she had become dangerous.
They came for her not with flashing knives, but with insidious stories. A relentless whisper campaign that she had poisoned her husband, that she had corrupted the sacred priesthood, and that she even bathed in the blood of infants to retain her unnatural beauty. Of course, none of it was true, but truth, she knew, was not the currency of power in their world. She recognized the chilling pattern. This is precisely what they did before they devoured their own gods, before they dismantled those who had grown too powerful.
So she struck first, with the only weapon that could counter their intangible assault. She summoned her most trusted scribes, and with grim determination dictated an entirely new mythology for herself. In this revised narrative, she was no longer merely a queen, nor a grieving widow, nor even a mother burdened by loss. She was the daughter of the storm itself, the womb of vengeance, and the last true God who would ever genuinely love them. The temples shifted again, their very purpose transformed. No longer did they echo with hymns of protection and solace. Now they resounded with terrifying prophecies of fire, of reckoning, of the goddess who walks in blood to wash away the sins of men. The people wept in fear, and they obeyed, and they feared her with a primal terror that transcended mere respect. But in private, she gradually stopped speaking, not out of pride or arrogance, but from an overwhelming, profound weariness. There was simply no one left to truly speak to, no one who could understand the depths of her burden. Even the gods themselves had grown silent in her presence. She began to write, not grand edicts for her empire, but intimate personal letters to her lost sons. Each night she penned one letter, then quietly buried it in the gnarled roots of a fig tree in the western courtyard, a secluded place where no one ventured any more. And then, quietly, one morning, she simply stopped. Not breathing, just being, her essence fading into the dawn. There was no grand ceremony, no thunderous pronouncement from the heavens. She walked to the very edge of the Nile, barefoot, feeling the cool earth beneath her feet. She watched the ancient river flow silently past, and there, in a voice barely a whisper, she asked, "What was I, if not the wound they wrapped in gold?" Then she turned away, returned to the palace, and never left her room again. Her final act, a retreat from the world she had so fiercely shaped. When she died,
The people screamed, a collective cry echoing through the city. Some tore their clothes in public displays of grief. Others sacrificed animals in fervent rituals. And some, in secret, even rejoiced, believing the sun was finally free to rise again without her shadow. They embalmed her heart separately, not as a mere tradition, but as a dire warning. "She must not return," declared the high priest, his voice trembling with fear. "Then bury her among the living," suggested a pragmatic general, ever focused on the tangible. "No," countered her loyal scribe, his voice firm, "among the myths."
They burned her letters, every single one, except for a single final message, the very last. It read, "To whoever finds this, if I am remembered, let it not be as queen, nor god, nor mother. Let it be as proof that a woman can become the very weapon used to destroy her and win." This was her ultimate declaration, her final defiant act of self-definition.
They built her tomb without windows, a sealed monument, not out of mere superstition, but from a profound reverence and a deep-seated fear. Because those who had truly seen what she became, what she dared to embody, the terrifying force she had molded herself into, understood one chilling truth. She was not merely a queen who had died. She was an entire empire that had paused, holding its breath in her absence.
For centuries after her passing, no one dared to speak her name aloud, not even in the most fervent prayers. The priests, with careful reverence, invoked her numerous titles: the Flame, the Order Binder, the Crown of Night, but her given name, her true identity, remained locked away, meticulously written in a sealed scroll hidden deep beneath the temple stone. It was said that to utter it aloud was to awaken her, and no one, not even the most desperate, wanted her awake.
Because she remembered, and gods who remember are undeniably dangerous. But memory, like water, always finds its way, seeping through cracks and finding new paths. She slipped into dreams again, a pervasive ethereal presence. A soldier dying on the eastern border claimed to see her riding a black chariot, her eyes glowing with the fierce light of burning cities. A midwife in Thebes swore she felt her presence when a child born still gasped miraculously back to life. In times of plague, people painted her sigil on their doorways, not to pray for healing, but to demand mercy from the unseen force she represented.
And sometimes, when the moon was dark and the world slept, women would gather in sacred silence around hidden shrines, tracing her symbols into the cool ash, whispering her forbidden poems like ancient spells. For long before she became a revered divinity, she had been one of them, a woman with all the pain and strength that entailed. The dynasty she created, a testament to her vision, flourished for a time, then inevitably decayed. Her successors, lacking her unique mind and iron-willed, married siblings, crowned themselves gods, and waged wars in her name. But none bore her profound intellect, nor carried her unique alchemy of survival in sorrow. They merely copied her silhouette, a pale imitation, but never her true substance.
until centuries later, the very last queen, Cleopatra, stood before the overwhelming might of Rome and audaciously called upon her legacy. "I am the daughter of Philadelphia," she declared, her voice ringing with ancient power. And in that pivotal moment, Rome itself was afraid, not of Cleopatra herself, but of what she truly represented. The enduring spirit of a queen who refused to be broken.
Because Arsinoe, yes, we speak her name now, a name finally liberated from its silence, was not a mere person anymore. She was a profound thesis. She was a timeless question posed to every generation that followed. What does it truly cost a woman to matter in a world that seeks to erase her?
Some say she was monstrous, that no genuine love could possibly survive inside a body wrapped in so much death and cold calculation. But others, those who meticulously read the margins of ancient scrolls, who trace the faded fingerprints in broken wax seals, tell a profoundly different story. They tell of a woman who adamantly refused to vanish, who understood with chilling clarity that mercy was a luxury the world simply did not afford women who dared to rule, who with deliberate intent made herself into a monument, not to be worshipped, but to be fiercely remembered, so that others perhaps would not die nameless.
And what then of her soul? The priests debated that profound question for centuries, their arguments echoing through temple halls. Some believed she had ascended fully, no longer bound to the human plane, a pure deity. Others whispered she had divided, one half eternally entombed, the other walking still beneath cloaks and across centuries, perpetually watching, not seeking resurrection, but a delicate, enduring balance. Because empires are not born from gods, they are born from ghosts, from the lingering echoes of those who sacrificed themselves. And Arsinoe became the ghost that would never truly leave the room, forever present.
You may pass her on the street today. She might not wear gold, or any visible sign of her past regality. She might wear a name that isn't hers, a disguise for centuries of watchful wandering. She might carry children, or hidden secrets, or the faint ancient scars of her battles. She might laugh too loudly, a release of centuries of tension, or say nothing at all, her silence profound. But you'll know her by one unmistakable thing. She remembers. She remembers everything. And if you dare to ask her, was it worth it, she will not answer. She will only offer you a crown, its gold heavy with history, and wait to see if you are brave enough to put it on.
There was never a funeral, not really, not for her. They tried, of course they tried. The scribes composed verses in 5 different languages. The priests burned incense in shapes that mimicked distant stars, and the nobles wept in public, bowed in private, and meticulously planned in secret. But no ritual, no matter how grand, could truly contain her, not after what she had done, not after what she had so profoundly become. She wasn't just a queen to bury, she was a living contradiction made flesh. And the only thing more dangerous than a contradiction itself is a memory that vehemently refuses to be rewritten.
In the great library of Alexandria, hidden behind a shelf of forgotten astronomy scrolls, there is a document. It is unsigned, untranslated, and unindexed, a silent enigma. The few scholars who dare to read it, those rare individuals permitted access, call it the fifth voice. It speaks not in commands, nor in prophecy, nor in philosophy, but purely in questions, profound and unsettling.
What is power if it demands your body in exchange for your soul? What is memory if the world edits out your pain but keeps your crown? What is survival if you must die in every version of yourself to live? The scroll itself is stained in a dark, enigmatic pigment. Some say it is merely ink, others whisper it is ancient blood. But those who truly know better say it is history. Not as it was meticulously written by the victors, but as it was fiercely survived by the vanquished. The crown she wore, the final one, the magnificent double crown bestowed in the temple where the gods first spoke, was never recovered. Some say it was buried with her, a silent companion in her eternal rest. Others believe it was melted down out of an almost primal fear that it might be worn again by another. But a few, those who still whisper her story across generations, say this: it was never truly a crown at all. It was, in fact, a mirror, because to wear it meant not power itself, but a chilling recognition of what you had profoundly become, of what the world had relentlessly made you do, and of the profound silence between your breaths that is not peace, but the quiet, haunting aftermath.
And so she lingers still, a pervasive shadow in the annals of time. You might find echoes of her in archives mislabeled, in frescoes half erased, in names mispronounced by kings who feared to say them right. She is not immortal because of grand temples or soaring poetry, or even the countless coins bearing her image. She is immortal because we still flinch, deep down when we hear her story. Because in the quiet corners of our souls, we understand her profound tragedy is not that she became divine, but that it was the only option left to her, the sole path to survival.
In another, kinder world, she might have been a philosopher, lost in contemplation, or a gentle mother dedicated to peace, or a quiet lover of serene gardens. She might have raised her sons in peaceful anonymity, laughed without consequence, and aged gracefully without ever becoming a legend. But this world, our world, does not grant women such quiet choices and still allow them to matter. So she mattered, with every fiber of her being, and she paid an unimaginable price for it.
You ask what she truly wanted. 1,000 titles, 1,000 shrines dedicated to her name, none of them truly answer that fundamental question. But in the remnants of a shattered statue found centuries later, on the banks of a forgotten tributary of the Nile, carved under her likeness in a language no one used anymore, was this stark inscription: I wanted to be real, but they needed a myth. This was her truth, etched in stone.
And so the myth continues, echoing through time,
Every time a woman chooses silence as her armor, every time she trades her inherent softness for cold survival, every time she hides her profound grief behind a facade of marble and steel, she is there. Not as an inspiration to be emulated, not as a goddess to be worshipped, but as a chilling, ever-present warning.
Because this is precisely what happens when you compel a woman to choose between her inherent power and her very self. She stops choosing, and with a chilling inevitability, becomes both. She becomes memory, she becomes monument. She becomes the profound prayer the priests cannot translate. She becomes the silence between battles, the held breath before a crown is placed, the deep, unyielding shadow beneath the throne.
And if you stand still long enough in any place where power relentlessly demands a sacrifice, a piece of your soul, your true name, your very humanity, you might hear her subtle, echoing question, "And what will they make you give up just to be remembered?" She was the queen who became her own religion, not because she desired such a fate, but because no one else would worship the complex, fierce, and deeply wounded woman she truly was. So she did it herself, and in doing so, she quietly, profoundly rewrote history, one hard-won scar at a time.
May the echoes of her story drift into your dreams, guiding you into a deep and peaceful sleep.